first thing about the social marketplace is that it is fluid and it's stormy. No one, I don't care who you are. I don't care if you're Carney, the governor of the Bank of Canada. I don't care if you're a British economist. I don't really care. No one knows what's going to happen. And the one thing you can be assured, though, in small businesses, any small business not prepared for rough weather is going to get themselves into serious trouble. One of the things that happened in 2007 and 2008 was a lot of businesses that were built for good weather tanked and sank. And it's time for us to relook at what creates a good, solid business, what is involved in the business foundations beyond good management, good inventory control, good financial control, and so on and so forth, human resources. What are some of the new things that we also need to consider in this new environment? And the message with this one is that we're not going home anytime soon, Toto. I don't know if you've watched The Wizard of Oz, but the little doggy there is named Toto, and it's all about getting back to Kansas, and we're not getting back to Kansas. I'm still meeting people going, when this blows over, it's not blowing over. This is it. What we're in now is what we have. This is not another little economic shift and change, and then we get back to business as usual. It's over. It's done. It's not going to work that way. So, in the social marketplace, what are some of the really key factors? Number one, relationships. A relationship is almost the closest thing you can get to a function or a factor within a business that is stormproof. Price? Nope. Great products? Nope. Any of those kinds of things? Customer service? No, absolutely not. It's relationships. They are what matter more than anything else, if for no other reason from a business perspective, because when you have an authentic, real relationship with another human being, that can't be bought and sold on the commodities marketplace. That's a relationship. That's cemented between two human beings. The next thing is that experience is the new commodity. We're not buying and selling hogbacks anymore, folks. We're buying and selling people feeling differently about themselves and the relationship with the businesses that they do business with. It's an experience moment. Whether we're having a glass of beer, a cup of coffee, buying a pair of jeans, a car, investing, doing whatever we want to feel like we're in the middle of something special. It's what we're geared up for. And if you think we've got that, look at the Gen Ys, the millennials, the kids we've raised. Every moment better be an experience. So they get bored and snap off and turn off and disappear instantly. They unfriend you. On a business, in terms of expert, the big thing now is influence. It's not persuading anyone to do anything, it is influencing them to do things. Terry O'Reilly, the great marketing guy who has his own show on the CBC and is available as a podcast, changed the name of his show from The Age of Persuasion to Under the Influence. Because that's what it's all about, it's influence. Psychologically, if you're interested in the study of sociology and psychology, there's a thing called social proofing. And social proofing is the process human beings use to look around themselves when we are unsure about how to behave in a certain environment. And so if we're, if I'm out with clients in Osaka and I'm not sure how to eat those little raw squids soaked in their own ink, I look around the table and I go, yeah, okay, you do it like this. That moment is called social proofing. It's when we look around ourselves and determine how we will behave in an environment by how the human beings around us are behaving. That is the essence of the social market. Increasingly, we don't care what the advertisers are telling us. I want to know what Philip's doing, what kind of car he's driving, what kind of food he's eating, what network groups he belongs to, because he's a friend and associate, someone I trust, he has influence. So my act of social proofing is I go, oh, Philip's going over there. I'm going to go over there too. That's the way it works. And the thing that social media does is it puts that whole thing on steroids. This is not just a restaurant full of people. This is a planet full of people, all behaving certain ways, and us making certain decisions to behave the same way based on the analytics. The other thing that this is the end of is the end of mass. Mass marketing and mass manufacturing. the product of the late 19th century that started to taper through the late 20th century, and it's done now. It'll never disappear completely because there is still a niche or a segment in the industrial world for something that's produced in such high quantities that it is able to drive price down, and then in turn is supported by Super Bowl ads. But by and large, as the primary determining force in marketing and doing business, it's gone. It no longer has the influence it did. If you want to see the beginning of the end of that, read Naomi Klein's No More Logo. Fabulous book. It begins to document the end of the decline of that kind of logo. And finally, it's also the end of the middle. We now either need to go giant or go tiny. Even with my own clients, who range typically in the sort of $1 to $10 billion small to medium-sized business space, I'm either pushing them up to get bigger and bigger and bigger so they can take advantage of buying and pricing and supply chain and so on, or we're going, no, stay boutique and form very, very unique and intimate relationships. It's the middle-sized operator that's getting squeezed out of this because they are trying typically to be everything for everyone, which is absolute anathema. That is the death in the new economy, in the new social market. Then we have the social customer. Social customer, number one, seeks experiences. Not products, not service, but experiences. Again, I said it earlier, and I'm tying the piece together now, whether you buy a car, a pair of jeans, or getting a massage, you want an experience, not just a product. You want to feel like a transformed human being by the time you've done business. Next, they're seeking their next identity. Notice I'm not saying they're seeking an identity. This is not some hippie, gonna find myself kind of thing, but we're realizing that in the world we're in, it's constantly changing. As I said earlier, the very first note, it's fluid and stormy. We're looking for a new way to be all the time. One of the great things that Terry O'Reilly said is that every great marketer since the Mad Men days of Madison Avenue in the 1940s, 1950s in New York realized there's two of us. There's who we are, and there's who we wish we could be. And every great marketer has always aimed themselves at the second one. They don't really care about who we are. They care about who we want to be, and they want to provide us with products and services to get us to there. And we want to keep up with the Joneses, the oldest form of that language. And in social marketing, that's even more important than it ever has been, because we're in a constant process of self-transformation, and businesses need to tap into that. The last point, the third thing in terms of the social consumer, the social customer, they're seeking a tribe. And that's Seth Godin's language. You haven't read Seth Godin's books, please do so. His concept of the tribe, which is a group of people who share a sense of values, a sense of aesthetic design, a sense of culture, so much more than just a market segment. Market segment language belongs to the age of mass marketing, right? We're looking in, you're male or you're female, you're Hispanic or you're white, and then we're going to market to you. It's done. Those days are gone. What we're interested in now is a sense of tribalism. And you'll notice one of the things about that is that basically that's something pretty small. It's not a giant unit. A tribe typically tends to be a pretty small unit. So it reinforces that sense of smallness and intimacy that's so important in all this. So how does a social business address some of these things? What constitutes a social business? What does a social business look like? By the way, if you're not a social business, for God's sake, do not try to get into social media. I'll try Twitter and I'll do a bit of Facebook for my business. If you're not an actual social business, then trying to do social marketing is like just sticking this thing onto the side of yourself and going, oh look, I've got a third arm and it's plastic and it doesn't do anything. It's exactly the same thing. It's a useless appendage. You need to become a social business first. If you want to read some of the really great work in this, read the work particularly coming out of a company called HubSpot in the US. They've done some great research on what constitutes social businesses and how that lead between being a social business and therefore producing authentic social marketing works. So what is a social business? Number one, it's flatter. So it's not particularly hierarchical, which means that information and commands and decisions don't flow from the top down. They tend to be crowdsourced, they tend to use skunkworks, they tend to use edge projects, they tend to be a flatter, more fluid organization where information and intelligence comes from all over the place. Number two, they tend to be porous. Stuff leaks in and leaks out. Groups form, groups dissolve. New ideas flow in and new ideas flow out. The old ideas, and what a great example of a company that you would think could have never mastered this, but absolutely has, it's IBM. Big Blue, the company that defined the traditional business wear, the blue suit, because it's Big Blue, is probably one of the most cutting-edge, modern, and poorest companies on the planet right now. Everyone thinks Apple's worth a lot of money. In terms of actual sales and actual revenue that flows through the company, IBM's bigger than Apple, and was during the height of Apple. We're talking about market capitalization. People get so, ooh, Apple's so huge. IBM has been relentlessly gigantic while being an incredibly fluid, porous company at the same time. Number 3, or number 4, social business creates experiences. It makes sure that throughout the entire customer cycle, different conversation, from the moment the customer is aware of you, to the point they decide that you particularly, rather than one of your competitors is worth doing business with, to the transaction, the cash register rings, and through the entire follow-through, the social business makes sure that entire cycle is an experience. You make people feel good about themselves, you make them feel like they're part of something unique and something special, and they want to come back for more. It's tribal. We talked about that. Social business understands that it's tribal. By the way, one of the things sometimes people have a little trouble wrapping their heads around. I was talking to a business, very interesting UT business on Vancouver. They're actually growing a tea plantation, first tea plantation in Canada. And I'm working with them, and one of the things one of the principals told me was, we're a little uncomfortable telling them that the crap they're drinking from David's tea is crap, because it's full of infusions and full of chemicals that are like not really controlled or regulated. It's not real tea. I said, you know what? And we'd already talked about the whole tribal thing, and I said to them, if you don't make enemies, you're not a tribe. This is all about only making friends. If you don't have ground to stand on that defines you as something special and unique and different, yet everyone loves you, something's wrong. Because real tribes, real sense of values, real cultures, and that thing that makes you you, and a gang, and a group, means you have shared values, and by definition means someone doesn't share your values. So if everyone loves you, something's wrong. If somebody's a little annoyed with you because they're not getting where you're coming from, you might be doing something right. And finally, for a social business, it is still about ROI. In the end, this is a profit-driven thing. And if you're not in your business to make a profit, I don't know what you do in here, because you're not in business. And you're in a social function, you're in whatever. And they're awesome. Having spent a good half of my life in community work and in arts work, I understand that world. But that's not the business world. The business world is profit-driven. So any social thing you enter into, whether it's defining yourself and exploring what it means to be a social business, and then investing in the processes of social media, if the people you're working with can't demonstrate ROI, if they can't say that if you do this and it's worth $98 and you can get $108 back, then you need to fire those people. There has to be demonstrable ROI because this is business. So even though all those other things are true, the underpinning foundation of the fact that this is a business doesn't go away. This is not patchouli oil and purpose vibes. This is the real stuff. We're still in the business world here. One of my favorite pictures on the entire planet. I'm a huge movie buff. My son is in the movie industry. My whole family's been in movies for a long time. Anybody know what that's from?
Breakfast at Tiffany's.
Yes. What does social marketing mean? First of all, it's inbound. As much as it can be, it means people moving towards you, not you promoting yourself outwards. So that's referrals, testimonials, repeat business, all the things that come in by people finding out about you as they move through the social world, and as a consequence of what I described earlier, which is social grouping. Other people are doing business with you, they have friends, they have neighbors, they have relatives, so the whole process of inbound marketing, of generating using social media, blogging, stories, pictures, all those things, to paint yourself, tell a story, and have them move towards you of their own volition because they have a sense they belong to your tribe. They get what you're about. They understand that your values are slightly different than your competitors' values, and your values resonate with them. They don't care about price. It matters, but it's not the final decision. It never has been, but it's even less so these days. Relationships, clearly, absolutely primary. I've already talked about it. Narrative. One of the things that's disappeared in the age of mass marketing and the age of mass manufacture is the jingle and the slogan. And thank God, especially with Seth Godin's support, almost the 60-second elevator pitch. We're almost done. It's almost gone. And I can't wait. One of the amazing things that social marketing allows you to do in social media is to generate stories. You don't need to tell your story in 60 seconds anymore. You can tell it over 100 blog articles. You can tell it over 30 YouTube videos. You can take your time to build that story of who you are to your customers. There's no rush. People always say, you can't tell it to me in 60 seconds, it's not real. No, this is not Y Combinator. This is not some kind of high-tech, turn it over in 90 days, sell it to an investor and move on kind of thing. We're talking here about businesses, and for me, a small business owner is different than an entrepreneur. They're two different animals. And I work with entrepreneurs, so it's nothing I like one another, but they're different. I'm talking here about businesses, small businesses, businesses that people plan on being on for years and sometimes for decades. So we're talking about. So that narrative matters. And finally, social marketing and the process continues the experience all the way through, whether it's in your advertising, whether it's in how you actually sell someone something, how you deliver it, how you follow through after the sale. That whole process of making somebody feel like they're along for a great ride never stops. And that's what the great social business understands. The new commodity I mentioned earlier, I just wanted to focus in on a little bit more, 2 slides left, is experience. Not products, not services, it's an experience that people are after. So what defines an experience? How do we look at it in the social economy, the social market? Number one, it's generally crowdsourced. Great businesses have always understood that what they have to offer is a solution to someone's problem. It's not about them. It's about their customer's problem. As a CEO, I think it was one of the big box stores said in the U.S. about 30 years ago, we don't manufacture drills. Or he said, we don't manufacture 3/4-inch drills, we produce 3/4-inch holes. It's not about my solution, it's about your problem. That's what we're really here for. In the social market, that just matters more than ever. You need to find out how you want to be defined by your customers. One of the great things, probably the greatest thing that Jeff Bezos ever created, the guy who founded Amazon, he said the definition of a brand is what people say about you when you're not in the room. You don't define your brand, your customers define your brand. Your tribe defines who you are as a business. The second thing is that it's intimate. What I mean by that is it's the old kinds of generalities of mass marketing don't work anymore. That's why we have micro-segmentation. 3 companies like SAP and HubSpot and Salesforce try to drive after the tiniest little detail. That sense of really getting to know who your customers are is incredibly important, and frankly why I believe small businesses have an enormous advantage over large conglomerates. There was an amazing study done about 18 months ago by IBM actually. It was an IBM on the life of CMOs, and they said the largest global corporations in the world cannot figure out how to scale social media. They tried, Coke has tried it, Ford has tried it, lots of companies have tried it, they have failed. It still ends up being advertising on Facebook. That's not a social marketing process. That's just me posting more stories about my products. So you read them. That's no different than a bulletin board or television. It just happens to be on Facebook. That's not social marketing. Small businesses actually have an advantage here because you can form intimate relationships with people. It's transactional, it's negotiated. That means it's ongoing. It doesn't change, it doesn't end. How you relate to customers today is going to be very different, perhaps, than how you relate to your customers 3 months from now, and that's okay. Your customers will tell you when to change if you know how to listen. Big one here. It is the velvet glove wrapped around the iron fist. And the velvet glove is the social intimacy, that sense of caring for people and building relationships with them. Inside that glove is the iron fist of systems. One of the great things that the Guide Michelin taught us way back in the early part of the 19th century about what defines a great restaurant is not a great meal. what defines a 3-star Guide Michelin restaurant, and there's only about 148 of them, no, sorry, 248 of them in the entire world, is not one great meal, it's the same great meal served 365 days a year, 24 hours a day. It is relentlessly system-driven. So you understand your customers, and then you figure out a systematic way to make sure that when they bring their best friend, and they just had a great experience with you, that great friend is going to have exactly the same experience. And you cannot do that without training, without systems, without manuals. It doesn't happen. You cannot ad hoc great customer experiences. And finally, it's 3-dimensional, complex, and cyclical. So that just simply means it's not just sort of, the moment of the sale or an ad, it's the whole ball of wax. And it's kind of a reflection of what I said earlier, that if you're not a social business, you can't do social marketing. You can't do social media effectively. It's you buy all in or you stay all out. It's not a pick, it's not a smorgasbord. Finally, oh, by the way, the reason I use these guys, in case you're wondering, this is a dance school in the United States. I always love this slide because people always say you can't be warm and fuzzy and beautiful and creative and be systems driven at the same time. You know what? As a classical musician and as somebody who's worked as a composer for classical dance for a good chunk of my life, the hell you can't. You try dancing like that without a system to support you, and still produce a knock 'em dead, raise the hair on the back of your neck performance night after night after night. Of course, it's a freaking system, and it's still gorgeous and beautiful and moving and all those other things. They're not only in the business world that we think those two things are mutually exclusive. The performing arts have understood for centuries that having great underlying systems still allows you to produce incredibly beautiful moments. You could run a deck of cards underneath those point shoes. And I bet you don't move them apart by more than 5 or 6 cards. Those point shoes are exactly the same height off the floor on every dancer in that room. There's only one way to do that, and that's relentless practice and relentless systems. But that does not mean you're boring or stiff or unresponsive. That's a kind of duality that doesn't exist in the performing arts. Last slide. Social tools. So how do they work? Just really quickly, and I'll leave at this point. It's kind of a segue to the other people we're going to talk. Number 1, social media. So just the whole general big fat ball of wax. Yes, if you're a social business, they work like a hot damn. I'm actually, frankly, these days a little astonished. Someone says, "Does Facebook really work?" Yeah, you haven't read. Like, yes, it works. Just take the time to look around. It works. You simply need to figure out how to make it work for your business, but that's a different question. As a tool, it's no different than any other form of media. Television, radio, newspapers, yellow pages. It's another highly effective marketing tool when used appropriately. Newsletters. The single most effective social tool that's out there, and it's only barely really a social tool that happens to work on the internet, email newsletters, MailChimp, constant contact. Still, on every study done year after year after year, when it comes to direct sales, and if you're looking for a social tool or an online tool that actually generates direct sales, electronic newsletters are still the most effective. SMS, brand new. So text messaging, being used by hospitals, counselors, businesses, very, very effective, very, very new. So text messaging is something to keep an eye on. Images. We're going to talk about images in a few minutes. If your social content is not largely image-driven, that is, let me rephrase that. Image-led, it's clearly message-driven and relationship-driven. But if it isn't fronted by beautiful and attractive images, the kind of stuff that people drool over and get addicted to for 9 hours on Pinterest or on Instagram, you're dead in the water. You need pictures. Pictures tell 1,000 words. That's an old thing. It's still true now and only more true than ever. Immersive environments. So make sure that the social media you're doing is somehow reflective of the business you're in. Again, they can't be completely separate. Take the time to use social media to tell your story. They're not a bunch of one-off, separated, distinct moments. It's a long story you're telling, one sentence, one post, one chapter, one paragraph at a time. That's how social media becomes effective, when you don't try to cram everything in to one post at a time. take your time, tell your story, and do it. You're going to try it that way. The one thing I haven't had on here, I actually sent myself a text message when I get back to the office. Mobile. Just want to remember that if you're, not just these days your social stuff, but even your website now, if it's not mobile friendly, particularly these days where two studies I've recently read said tablets are growing even faster than phones right now. When you're not tablet friendly, that means a growing number of people will look at your content and not be able to become attracted to it. I won't say they won't be able to read it, but because this is so emotional and image driven, it needs to actually be attractive. It needs to be beautiful, seductive objects of desire. That's how this stuff works. So, there you go. And if I've got some books here to sell. Here's my shill at the very end. Some of the stuff is covered in here. Talk to me afterwards. I'm available to talk about the book. Thank you very much.